Welcome back to Management 2020. The goal of this video is to talk about the value of the case method that is used a lot in business education. So we'll talk about why use the case study method, the skills that you can develop through the case study method, and then also some just cautions and warnings about the case study method. So what is a case study? Well, case studies are a real life business scenario. Often they'll solicit information from people who had real business situations, and then write a summary of that business situation. And the goal there is for students primarily to be able to analyze the factors that led to some kind of decision making or problem solving in the business context. Now, business is not the only field that uses case study approach. Law school a lot uses the case study approach, but even education and other social science fields are using this case study approach because it highlights these practical aspects of theoretical or concepts that are learned in business textbooks or in business articles, but applied to a real life situation so that students can imagine or role play what it's like to be business owners or other decision makers. So why do we do it? Like, what's the value? Well, there's a lot of different skills that can come out of case study skills. When I used to work at University of Virginia Law School, one of the deans of the law school liked to say that law school, the point of a law school education is to get you to think like a lawyer. And so the same thing is true of business education. The point of a business education and the point then of case studies is to get you to think like a business professional. And most of us in business school are not yet business professionals. We don't maybe own our businesses. We may not work full time, but that's our goal. And so yes, we go to school and we learn a lot of content. We learn a lot of practical skills. But we also need to learn the intellectual skills to know how to think like a business professional. And so that's one of the main purposes of the case study is to help us think like a business professional and a decision maker. And so we learn critical thinking skills. We learn how to analyze problems. We learn to see what's important and what's not important for a decision. We learn good oral communication skills because we're discussing cases in class. And we learn good written skills because we have to write a case study analysis usually and describe what we think are the main points and how they work together and then propose a solution. And that's where we get into argumentation skills. We learn how to defend a choice based on solid claims, reasoning, and evidence. And one of the things we have to learn as we do this is that there's not always one correct answer. In fact, there's almost never a correct answer, but there are many viable options. And so learning how to make a decision when there isn't a clear right answer, but then how to be able to support that decision using good evidence is another important part of good business skills. So here's a summary of kind of those skills that we talked about. We learn to read carefully and take notes, to analyze and think critically, to hypothesize and imagine, well, what if this happened? How would that impact other things? We learn to discuss and listen with one another. We learn to write and organize, and we learn to apply these theoretical concepts we learn in our courses to practical decision making. So let me just share some cautions about using case studies. First, these cases are always written after the fact. And so they can make it seem like maybe there is a correct choice or there's an obvious choice or of course, why didn't someone make these decisions? It's so easy to see, but that's always easier to see afterwards. And so as we analyze these case studies, it's important to remember that not all business decisions are maybe as clear or easy to understand as what we might see in a case study. And that sometimes good things happen by coincidence. And that sometimes bad things can happen not because someone made bad choices, but just because the timing wasn't right. So they do tend to somewhat oversimplify complex situations, and they may make it seem like someone's choices led to that great decision, but sometimes there's bad luck or good luck involved in real life situations. It's also important to recognize that correlation does not equal causation. And I'm sure you've heard this before, but it's the idea that just because two things happened at the same time, or one thing happened right after another, doesn't mean that the first thing caused the second thing. It could just be coincidence that those things are happening in sequence and that one didn't trigger the other. And so it's important to remember that when we look at case studies, because sometimes it may seem like, well, of course, this created this because it happened first. But just because it happened first doesn't mean that the second thing was a result of the first thing. It could just be coincidence. Another thing that we want to be careful of when we're doing case study is recognizing that although it's great to seek out support, and you'll have support from classmates and your instructor as you read through. Ultimately, you need to develop these skills on your own. And especially when it comes to the written work and the work that you submit through Canvas and to your professors when you're doing case studies, that needs to be your own work. You can't rely on a classmate or a tutor to create your outlines for you, to write your paragraphs for you. AI tools should not be drafting your work. Now, in this course, you can use AI tools after you've written your draft as part of the revision process. And other instructors may not permit that. So it's always important to check with your instructor what kinds of support are acceptable and at what level do I need to be working independently. So in class, we'll discuss as a team to analyze the case and to better understand it. But ultimately, you're going to draft your own analysis and you will write it for this course. And so AI should not be used during that drafting phase. A tutor or AI could be used during the revision stage, but you need to develop those thinking skills and those writing skills independently first. So in this brief video, we talked about the value of the case method. In future videos, we'll talk about how to prepare for a case discussion with your team, how to participate in that case discussion, and then how to take the information from your discussions to write the case analysis report.